Ducati's boss has finally opened up about telemetry data that has long been one of the team's biggest secrets, and what the data reveals has left many people stunned. It's not just Marc Marquez who has a riding style that is extremely difficult to replicate. There are also surprising facts about how several Ducati riders control their bikes, showing that their techniques are far more extreme than previously thought. If this data truly exposes the differences in their abilities behind the handlebars, then who is actually the hardest Ducati rider to imitate, and why is his riding style so unique? Let's discuss. Ducati is known as one of the most advanced manufacturers in MotoGP when it comes to using data. Their strength comes not only from the performance of the Desmosedici, but also from their ability to collect and process information from multiple bikes competing on the track. The more Ducatis that race, the larger the amount of data they can gather. Every lap generates valuable information about how the bike performs and how a rider exploits its potential. The available data is incredibly detailed. Ducati can monitor hydraulic brake pressure, throttle position, lean angle, speed, acceleration, and even the level of wheel slip at the rear wheel. All of this information is then analysed by engineers to understand what happens when the bike is pushed close to the limits of its capabilities. Under the leadership of Gigi Dall'Igna, data sharing among Ducati riders has also become one of the key foundations in the development of the Desmosedici. In theory, one rider can study what another Ducati rider is doing. They can see when the throttle is opened, how hard the brakes are applied, how quickly the bike is leaned over, and even how the bike accelerates out of a corner. However, this is where an interesting fact emerges. Being able to see the data does not automatically mean a rider can replicate the same performance. According to Dall'Igna, there are several riders with highly specific riding characteristics, making their techniques difficult to reproduce simply by studying telemetry. And one of the most prominent names is Marc Marquez. Marc Marquez has an extremely distinctive riding style. One of his most noticeable strengths appears when tackling left-hand corners. Ducati has seen how Marquez can bring the Desmosedici to an extreme lean angle incredibly quickly while still maintaining control over the bike's rotation. This ability allows him to change direction aggressively while simultaneously preparing the bike for acceleration toward the corner exit. That uniqueness did not appear overnight. Marquez's background in flat track and dirt track racing helped shape his ability to control a motorcycle. Those experiences made him extremely comfortable dealing with situations in which the rear tyre loses grip or begins to slide while the bike is leaned over. What makes him even harder to imitate is the combination of body position, balance, throttle control, and reflexes. Marquez can use a small amount of rear wheel movement to help rotate the bike toward the direction he wants. All of this happens within an incredibly short period of time, with his reactions appearing almost instinctive. On a telemetry screen, everything simply looks like numbers and lines. But a graph cannot show how Marquez actually feels changes in tyre grip in real time. Other riders may be able to see the exact moment Marquez opens the throttle or the lean angle he uses. But when they try to replicate those numbers, the bike may not respond in the same way. Instead, they could lose stability, experience excessive wheel spin, or cause the front tyre to lose grip. This is the biggest limitation of telemetry. Data can show what Marquez does, but it cannot fully explain how his body and mind react to those situations. If Marquez stands out particularly in left-hand corners, Francesco Bagnaia has a different strength. One of Bagnaia's main weapons is braking. Bagnaia is known for being able to brake extremely deep into corners without causing the bike to lose stability. That ability isn't simply about having the courage to brake late. The much more difficult part is maintaining brake pressure as the bike begins to lean. This technique is known as trail braking. Bagnaia is able to make the most of the front tyre, pushing it close to the limit of its available grip while gradually reducing pressure on the brake lever. That modulation has to be extremely precise. Too much pressure can cause the front tyre to lock up or make the bike lose balance. On the other hand, too little pressure means the bike won't slow down quickly enough and the rider can lose position in the corner. Telemetry data can certainly show Bagnaia's braking pressure. But there is one thing that cannot be recorded perfectly: his feel for the front tyre. A rider has to be able to sense when the tyre still has grip and when it is approaching its absolute limit. That sensation cannot simply be transferred through numbers. That is why Bagnaia's braking style is also difficult for other Ducati riders to copy and replicate. Interestingly, Ducati doesn't only have Marquez and Bagnaia. Fabio Di Giannantonio has an entirely different riding character. The Pertamina Enduro VR46 racing team rider is known for being particularly strong at maintaining corner speed. Instead of relying on extreme braking and then aggressively stopping the bike, Di Giannantonio tends to maintain momentum while the bike is in the middle of the corner. He is able to keep his roll speed high with a stable lean angle and relatively smooth control inputs. This style offers a major advantage over the course of a long race. The bike doesn't have to constantly undergo extreme load transfers. Tyre loads can be managed more effectively, traction remains more consistent, and lap times can be maintained over a longer period. In other words, Ducati has 3 riders with 3 different riding styles. Daligna's statement becomes even more significant when viewed through the lens of Ducati's development philosophy. With so much data available, Ducati must actually be careful not to fall into the trap of developing a bike that suits only one particular riding style. Imagine if the entire development of the Desma Sediti were focused on Bagnaia's braking style. Bagnaia might become even more comfortable, but that doesn't necessarily mean Marquez would get the response he wants from the bike. The same applies to Di Giannantonio and the other Ducati riders. That is why Ducati needs a strong baseline performance. The chassis, engine, electronics, aerodynamics, and weight distribution all have to produce a bike that is competitive and relatively neutral. After that, it is the rider who takes the bike toward its ultimate performance limit. This is one of the reasons Ducati benefits from having multiple riders on the grid. Data from different riding styles helps engineers find a middle ground that can work with a variety of rider characteristics. Interestingly, those differences in riding styles are also reflected in their performances. Based on the championship standings discussed in this material, Marquez sits in 4th place with 200 points, while Di Giannantonio is directly behind him with 199 points. Just 1 point separates the two. Meanwhile, Bagnaia sits in 3rd place. This situation shows that the same motorcycle can produce different approaches from each rider. Marquez doesn't need to ride like Bagnaia, Bagnaia doesn't need to ride like Marquez, and Di Giannantonio doesn't have to imitate either of them. Instead, the uniqueness of each rider becomes part of Ducati's strength. And this is where the story becomes even more interesting. If a rider leaves Ducati, their telemetry data certainly doesn't simply disappear from the database. So the question now is, will MotoGP technology one day truly be able to break through this limitation? Or will humans remain the final factor that can never be fully translated into numbers? Let us know what you think in the comments below.